The man behind table 12 had not touched his drink in 20 minutes, and somehow I knew that mattered. It was 11:43 on a rainy Friday night in Manhattan, the hour when Bellinis usually softened into coffee, quiet conversations, and tired servers counting the minutes until closing. I had been on my feet since 5, my black shoes felt half a size too small, and all I wanted was to finish my shift, catch the subway home, and forget the smell of espresso until tomorrow. Then Julian Cross walked in. I did not know his name yet. I only knew what happened to the room when he entered. Our manager stopped talking in the middle of a sentence. The hostess forgot to ask whether he had a reservation. 2 men near the bar lowered their voices. Julian did not demand any of it. He simply removed his rain-darkened coat, handed it to the hostess, and walked toward the private dining section as if the room had been expecting him. 3 men joined him. No menus. No small talk. I brought sparkling water and 4 glasses of bourbon that remained almost untouched. Their voices stayed low, but years of waiting tables had taught me how to notice things without appearing to notice anything. A tightened jaw, a hand covering a phone, someone checking the entrance too often. That was when I noticed the man behind Julian. He sat alone at the bar with a clear view of table 12 through the mirrored wall. Dark jacket, gray shirt, 1 drink, 20 minutes, not a single sip. Every few seconds, his eyes moved from Julian's reflection to the hallway leading toward the rear exit. I told myself not to invent trouble. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he hated his drink. Maybe exhaustion was turning ordinary people into mysteries. Then his hand disappeared beneath his jacket, stayed there for several seconds, and returned empty. My stomach tightened. I carried a tray toward the service station. An unfamiliar waiter stood near the kitchen doors with his phone pressed close to his ear. "They changed the exit," he whispered. He saw me. His conversation ended instantly. I kept walking. "Do not stare, Hannah. Do not react." I set the tray down and looked across the dining room. Julian was still seated with his back toward the bar. The stranger checked his watch. One of Julian's companions glanced toward the front entrance. The unfamiliar waiter disappeared into the kitchen. Separate details suddenly stopped feeling separate. I could tell my manager, but I had no proof. I could approach Julian, but if I was wrong, I could lose my job. If I was right, saying anything aloud might be worse. Then I saw the printer beside the register. I printed table 12's bill and stared at the paper. My hand shook when I picked up a pen. There was no time for elegance. I circled several words and wrote beneath them, "Gunman behind you. Deal gone wrong. Exit now." I carried the leather folder across the restaurant. Every step sounded too loud. Julian looked up when I reached him. "Your check, sir." He opened the folder. His eyes moved across my message once, then twice. He did not turn around. That was what frightened me most. A scared man would have looked. Julian simply raised his eyes to mine. "How certain are you?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Certain enough to risk being wrong. Something changed in his expression. Not panic. Calculation. He folded the bill once and slipped it into his coat pocket. Then he looked past me toward the mirrored wall. "Walk back to the kitchen, Hannah." My breath caught. For one stupid second, I wondered how he knew my name. Then I remembered the brass name tag pinned to my uniform. Julian's gaze returned to mine. His voice became even quieter. "And whatever happens next, do not look back." I did not look back. That was harder than it sounds. Every nerve in my body wanted to know what was happening behind me. But Julian Cross had spoken with the calm certainty of someone who understood danger better than I ever wanted to. So I walked toward the kitchen at the same steady pace I had used all night, carrying an empty tray against my hip while my heartbeat seemed loud enough to reach every table. Behind me, a chair moved. Glass touched wood. Someone near the bar laughed. Nothing sounded unusual. Somehow, that frightened me more. I pushed through the kitchen doors and nearly collided with Marco, our floor manager. "Hannah, what happened at table 12? "They are leaving." "Leaving? They have not finished." I kept walking toward the employee hallway. Maybe they lost their appetite. 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. No shouting. No panic. Bellinis continued serving dinner as if I had not just warned a stranger that his meeting had gone terribly wrong. 5 minutes later, Marco returned. His face had lost some color. "They are gone." I released a breath. "Good. What did you say to that man?" I gave him his check. Technically, it was true. By 12:30, the restaurant had nearly emptied. I started convincing myself I had exaggerated everything. Maybe the stranger at the bar had been reaching for a phone beneath his jacket. Maybe the unfamiliar waiter had been discussing a delivery exit. Maybe Julian had simply decided to leave. Normal explanations felt comforting until I clocked out at 12:41 and stepped through the employee entrance into cold rain. A black SUV waited across the street. I stopped beneath the awning. Its rear door opened. Julian stepped out. He crossed the wet pavement without an umbrella, looking exactly as composed as he had at table 12. "You followed my instructions," he said. "You came back. I had a reason. Do I get to know it?" His eyes moved briefly toward the restaurant behind me. "Someone changed the location of my meeting tonight. That sounds inconvenient. Someone else knew which table I would use, when I would arrive, and which exit my driver had been told to wait beside." The cold seemed to sharpen around me. "You think somebody betrayed you. I know somebody did. And you think I know who. I think you noticed something my people missed." I tightened my grip on my purse. "I told you everything I saw." "Not necessarily." "Meaning?" "People remember details after they understand which questions matter." Another vehicle turned onto the block. Julian glanced toward it, and the smallest change passed through his expression. It was enough. "You need to come with me." "No," his gaze returned to mine. "Hannah, you do not get to say my name like that makes it an instruction." For the first time, he looked genuinely surprised. "This is about your safety." Then explain the danger instead of ordering me around. The approaching vehicle slowed near the intersection. Julian looked at it once, then stepped closer, keeping his voice low. 6 people knew where that meeting would happen tonight. 6 people knew the schedule. One of them sold that information. And whoever did it may eventually realize a waitress warned me. My stomach tightened. Eventually, if we are lucky. I stared at him. "You have an interesting definition of lucky." A faint shadow of amusement crossed his face and vanished. Then he opened the SUV door. "I can keep you somewhere secure until I know what happened." I did not move. "I thought you came back because I was a witness." "You are." "Then ask me questions." Julian's expression became unreadable. "Here." "Why not?" He glanced toward the vehicle at the intersection. It had stopped. "Because someone sold me out tonight," he said quietly. "And you are the only witness they do not know I have." The vehicle at the intersection stayed there long enough for me to stop pretending it was ordinary traffic. Rain slid across its windshield, turning the headlights into pale streaks on the pavement. Julian watched it without moving. "Still want to question me here?" I asked. "No." "Then find somewhere public." His eyes narrowed. "Public is not necessarily safe. Neither is getting into your car. You warned me 5 minutes after deciding I might be in danger. That was my choice." I held his gaze. "I saved you because your life mattered. Do not repay me by acting like mine does not." Julian became completely still. The SUV across the street started moving again and disappeared around the corner. He looked back at me. "You think protection and control are the same thing to me. I think you have probably had enough power for long enough that nobody bothers explaining the difference." A man approached from Julian's SUV carrying an umbrella. He was tall, maybe 38, dressed in a dark overcoat, with the tired expression of someone responsible for problems nobody else noticed. "Mason Ward," he said. "Security." "Hannah Reed." "Waitress." "Apparently witness." Mason almost smiled. Julian did not. "There is a diner 3 blocks east," I said. "Open all night. Bright windows. Plenty of people." Julian looked at Mason. Mason nodded. "We can secure the route. Nobody needs to secure 3 blocks of Manhattan for me." "You would be surprised," Julian said. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a cracked vinyl booth with bad coffee between my hands while Julian occupied the seat across from me, and Mason sat 1 booth away. It was ridiculous. It was also the first moment all night when I could breathe normally. Julian asked me to describe everything again. The stranger, the untouched drink, the unfamiliar waiter, the whispered words. I closed my eyes and rebuilt Bellini's from memory. "The waiter had something clipped inside his waistband," I said. "A card. Employee identification? Maybe. Red plastic. Bellini's uses blue cards." Julian leaned forward slightly. "Anything printed on it?" I only saw part of a logo. A silver circle with a line through it. Mason turned around immediately. "Cross-Atlantic parking." Julian's expression changed. "The garage beneath Bellini's." I opened my eyes. "So he worked downstairs?" "Possibly," Mason said. "Or wanted you to think he did." I remembered something else. His right hand. Julian waited. There was a pale mark near his thumb, and a silver watch. He checked it when one of the men at your table got up. Which man? I searched my memory. Gray suit, dark hair, older than Julian. He had left the table twice. The man sitting to your left. Mason and Julian exchanged a look. Grant Holloway, Mason said. Does that mean something? Not yet. Julian replied too quickly. I heard the answer beneath the answer. It meant enough. My phone vibrated against the table. I expected Sarah asking why I was late. Instead, the screen showed an unknown number. For words appeared beneath it. You should have stayed quiet. The diner suddenly felt colder. Julian saw my face. What happened? I turned the phone toward him. His eyes moved across the message, and something hardened behind them. Now will you let me protect you? I looked at him, then at the glowing windows surrounding us. Protect me, yes. I slipped the phone back into my purse. On my decisions, no. Mason lowered his eyes, hiding another almost smile. Julian stared at me for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he nodded. Your apartment or somewhere else? My apartment. You choose the route. That surprised me even more. 25 minutes later, Mason's SUV stopped outside my building in Queens. Before I opened the door, Julian spoke from beside me. Hannah. I turned. Grant has been with me for 12 years. There was no authority in his voice now. Only something heavier. Then I hope I remembered wrong. Julian looked toward the rain-darkened window. So do I. I barely slept. Every time a car slowed outside my building, my eyes opened. Every vibration from my phone made my stomach tighten. Even after Mason confirmed the message had come through a temporary number that revealed almost nothing useful. By 8 the next morning, rain had washed Manhattan clean, but nothing about the night before felt distant. Julian called at 8:12. Did you sleep? Is that part of the investigation? No, then barely. A pause. Mason found something. 40 minutes later, I was sitting in a quiet coffee shop near Bellini's with Julian and Mason. No private room. No men standing at the door. Julian had apparently remembered our conversation about protection and control. Mason placed a tablet on the table. Bellini's management gave us access to the relevant security footage after we reported the suspicious employee impersonation. The garage company is reviewing its records separately. That made more sense than the impossible access I had half expected from men like them. We watched footage from the restaurant hallway first. The unfamiliar waiter appeared at 11:36, already dressed in Bellini's uniform. He moved through the service area like he knew exactly where he was going. Pause, I said. Mason stopped the video. His watch. Julian leaned closer. Silver face. Black band. Same man. Yes. Mason advanced the footage. At 11:41, Grant Holloway left the private dining room and walked toward the restroom corridor. 3 seconds later, the fake waiter checked his watch. At 11:52, Grant left the table again. Same gesture. Same 3-second delay. My skin prickled. Play it again. Mason did. Julian watched without speaking. Maybe coincidence, I said. Twice. Mason asked. Coincidences happen twice. Julian finally spoke. Grant knew the meeting schedule. So did 5 other people. I reminded him. You wanted facts, not fear. His eyes shifted toward me. I remember. Mason opened another file. The garage has confirmed a red contractor credential was issued to a temporary maintenance crew last month. One card was never returned. Who authorized the crew? Julian asked. Mason hesitated. That hesitation told me the answer before he said it. Transportation operations. Julian's expression hardened. Grant oversees transportation. Silence settled over the table. I looked back at the frozen image. Grant in the hallway. The stranger touching his watch. No handshake. No conversation. Nothing that proved anything. This is still not enough, I said. Julian leaned back. You are defending him? No. I am defending the truth from becoming whatever you already want to believe. Mason looked down at his coffee. Julian stared at me. You think I want Grant to be guilty? I think part of you wants certainty more than you want the truth. That landed harder than I intended. Julian turned toward the window. For several seconds, he looked less like the man who had silenced Bellini's simply by entering and more like someone carrying 12 years of memories he suddenly did not trust. He was there before any of this, he said quietly. Before the cars. Before the restaurants. Before people started treating my name like a warning. Then that is why this hurts. His jaw tightened. You do not know what hurts me. Maybe not. I watched his reflection in the window. But I know you are not afraid of enemies. He looked at me. What am I afraid of? Finding out one of them used to be family. Julian said nothing. Mason's phone vibrated. He read the screen, then placed it face down. Grant just called. He wants to know why last night's meeting was canceled. Julian's eyes narrowed. Did you tell him we were reviewing footage? No, did anyone? Not from our side. My phone buzzed on the table. Another unknown number. This time there were only 6 words. Stop looking at the man beside him. I turned the screen toward Julian. He read it once. His face became completely still. I looked from the message to the frozen image of Grant on Mason's tablet. Whoever was watching us did not want the investigation to end. They wanted to control where we looked. The second message changed the way I looked at every face in Bellini's. By the time my shift started that evening, I had memorized the people at the bar, the delivery drivers near the service entrance, even the couple arguing quietly over appetizers at table 6. Marco noticed. You look like you are expecting trouble. I am expecting Friday night customers. He laughed. I did not. Julian had offered to keep me away from work until Mason finished checking the security records. I refused. Missing shifts meant missing rent money, and I was not going to let an anonymous message reorganize my life. At 6:30, 12 white roses arrived at the hostess stand. My name was on the card. No message. I stared at them until Jenna whispered, "Please tell me those are from someone interesting." I called Julian. Did you send flowers? Yes. Why? People send flowers when they are grateful. Normal people send 6. You sent 12 roses that probably cost more than my electric bill. I can pay your electric bill. I closed my eyes. That is exactly the wrong answer. There was silence on the line. I am beginning to understand that. I almost smiled. Almost. At 9, Mason arrived with an envelope. Before you get angry, this was his idea, not mine. Inside was a cashier's check large enough to cover months of rent and leave plenty behind. I stared at the number, then at Mason. Take it back. I strongly recommend telling him yourself. So after closing, I met Julian at the same all-night diner where he had questioned me. He sat in the corner booth with black coffee in front of him. I placed the check beside it. No, Julian glanced down. You did not even think about it. I thought about it all evening. Then the amount is wrong. The amount is not the problem. Everyone has expenses. That does not mean everyone is for sale. His expression tightened. I did not say you were. You did not have to. I slid the check toward him. You believe everything creates a debt. I helped you, so now you need to balance the account. You put yourself at risk for me. Before I knew who you were. Exactly. He sounded almost frustrated by that. Why? I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug. Because you were a person in danger before you were anything else. Julian stared at me. The diner hummed around us. A waitress refilled sugar jars behind the counter. A delivery truck rolled past the windows. For several seconds, he looked less like the man who made rooms go quiet, and more like someone hearing an idea he had forgotten existed. Everything has a price where I come from, he said. Then maybe you have spent too long around people who wanted something from you. His eyes dropped to the check. This could make your life easier. Probably. You could move somewhere safer. Probably. Help your family. Probably. And you still refuse? Yes. Why? I leaned forward. Because if I take your money, then what I did becomes something you bought. He said nothing. I could see the argument leaving him one piece at a time. Finally, he picked up the check, folded it once, and tore it cleanly in half. Better. Much. A small smile touched his face. This time I saw it. You are difficult, Hannah Reed. You are just not used to hearing no. His smile disappeared, but not because he was angry. Grant called me again today, and he asked why I was investigating the garage. My fingers tightened around the mug. Did you tell him? No, did Mason? No, Julian looked through the diner window. Only 3 people knew. You, Mason, and me. Yes. My phone vibrated on the table. Unknown number. I looked at Julian before opening it. The message contained one sentence. Stop asking questions, or someone else pays for them. Julian read it over my shoulder. His face hardened. Now do you understand why I offered the money? I looked at the torn check between us. Yes. And I slipped my phone into my purse. And money still cannot solve the part of this that scares you. His eyes met mine. What part is that? You still do not know who to trust. Julian did not answer immediately. He stared at the rain sliding down the diner window while the torn halves of his check rested between us like proof that money had finally failed him. Trust is expensive, he said. Only when you keep buying the wrong kind. His eyes returned to mine. For a moment, I thought he might argue. Instead, he nodded once. 2 nights later, Bellini's looked exactly as it always did on a busy Sunday evening. That was the point. Julian had arranged another meeting at table 12, and according to Mason, only the same small circle of people knew about it. A test. I hated being anywhere near it. Julian had wanted me off work. I had reminded him that we had already discussed this. He had surprised me by accepting my answer. At 8:15, I carried sparkling water toward the private section and found Julian seated with Mason and 2 men I recognized from the first night. Grant was absent. "Where is your friend?" I asked quietly. Julian looked up. "Delayed. Convenient. You are supposed to be working." "I am. You are supposed to be ordering." Mason covered a smile with his hand. Julian opened his menu. "Coffee. That is not dinner." "Coffee, Hannah." "Fine." For almost an hour, nothing happened. Then a waiter I had never seen before stepped from the service hallway. Bellini's hired people regularly, but nobody started a shift at 9 on Sunday without Marco introducing them. The man wore the right uniform. Wrong shoes. Black sneakers instead of polished dress shoes. He moved directly toward table 12 carrying a leather check folder. My pulse climbed. "Excuse me," I called. He ignored me. He placed the folder in front of Julian. "Your check, sir." Julian looked at him. "I did not ask for it. Management requested I bring it." The waiter walked away before Julian could answer. I followed him with my eyes until the kitchen doors closed behind him. "Do not open that," I said. Julian already had. His expression changed. Mason stood. "What does it say?" Julian closed the folder. "Nothing Hannah needs to see." I held out my hand. "We have moved past that." "Not tonight." "Julian." He stared at me for 3 seconds, then handed it over. The message on the back was written in neat black ink. "You saved him once. You will not do it twice." My fingers went cold. "This is for me." Julian rose. "Mason, find the waiter." Mason disappeared toward the kitchen. "You are leaving with me," Julian said. "No, this is not a negotiation." "Then you learned nothing at the diner. Someone just threatened you." "Exactly. Which means they want you thinking about me instead of them." Julian stopped. I looked toward the service station where I had left my purse beneath the counter. Something was wrong. The strap was hanging differently. I crossed the room and opened it. Wallet. Keys. Lip balm. No phone. My phone is gone. Julian was beside me instantly. "When did you last have it?" 10 minutes ago. Mason returned through the kitchen doors. The waiter left through the service exit. Marco confirms he was never scheduled here. I looked at the message again. The first warning had been about Julian. This one was about me. Then the front desk phone rang. Marco answered. His face changed as he listened. "Hannah," he said slowly. "It is for you." I took the receiver. "Hello." A calm male voice answered. "Tell Julian Cross to stop asking questions about Grant Holloway." My heartbeat seemed to stop. Who is this? The line went dead. Julian had heard enough from my expression. What did he say? I repeated it. Mason immediately reached for his phone, but I looked at Julian. His face had gone cold in a way I had never seen before. "Do not," I said. "Do not what?" "React. They came after you. That is why." My eyes dropped to the message in my hand. The first time, they needed you gone. This time, they need you angry. Julian stared at me. Then my gaze fell on the empty place in my purse where my phone had been, and one thought hit me harder than the threat itself. My sister. I grabbed Mason's phone and called her. Once. Twice. Straight to voicemail. Julian reached for his coat. "We are going." For the first time since meeting him, I did not argue. Because suddenly, I understood the second message was never meant to frighten me. It was meant to control him. Sarah answered on the third call. "Hannah, why are you calling from someone else's phone?" My knees almost gave out. I gripped Mason's phone with both hands. "Are you home?" "No. I am at Madison's. We ordered pizza. What is wrong?" I closed my eyes. "Nothing I can explain right now. Stay there tonight. Lock the door, and do not answer it unless you know exactly who is outside." Sarah went silent. "Hannah, you are scaring me." "I know. I am sorry. Just trust me." When the call ended, relief lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then I looked at Julian. He was already speaking to Mason in a voice so quiet I almost missed the words. "Find Grant." Mason nodded. "I will locate him." "No," I said. Julian turned toward me. "Hannah, you are doing exactly what they planned. They mentioned your sister. They wanted me to think they had her. They did not. That does not make this harmless. I never said it was harmless. I held up the second message. Look at the pattern. First, they tried to remove you from the meeting. Then they warned me to stop asking questions. Now they mention Grant by name and make you afraid for someone I love. Every step pushes you toward the same thing, which is acting before you think. Julian's jaw tightened. You want me to ignore this? I want you to stop being predictable. Mason looked between us, then slowly lowered his phone. Julian noticed. You agree with her? I think she has a point. Julian gave him a look that would have made most people reconsider their entire lives. Mason did not move. My attention returned to the receipt. The fake waiter had delivered it at 9:14. The phone call came less than 5 minutes later. Everything was timed. Who controls your transportation schedules? I asked. Grant oversees the division, Julian said. Who can change your drivers? Grant and 2 supervisors. Who knew you would be at Bellini's tonight? The same group we were testing. Mason opened his tablet and began checking records. Julian's phone rang before he could finish. Julian looked at the screen. Grant. He answered. Where are you? I watched his expression while Grant spoke. No. Stay there. Another pause. I said stay there. Julian ended the call. He wants to meet at a warehouse near the Hudson. I stared at him. Of course he does. He says he has information. At night. In a warehouse. It is a property we use. That does not make it less convenient. Mason pulled up a map. The warehouse sat beside a service road leading toward one of Cross Atlantic Parking's private facilities. I leaned closer. There. Mason followed my finger. What? The garage from the first night was part of your transportation network. The fake waiter had access connected to that network. Now Grant wants you at another property connected to the same system. Mason's eyes sharpened. If someone has internal access, they could track every vehicle assigned to Julian. Or change where those vehicles are supposed to be, I said. Julian looked at the map, then reached for his coat. I caught his sleeve. Do not. His eyes dropped to my hand. They used you to get to me. Then prove they chose the wrong person. How? Do not give them the man they prepared for. He stared at me. I could almost see the argument happening behind his eyes. Anger against reason. Instinct against restraint. 12 years of trust against 2 nights of evidence. Then Julian slowly removed his hand from his coat. Mason, he said, audit every transportation access record from both nights before anyone contacts Grant. Mason nodded. Julian sat back down. It was such a small movement that nobody else in the restaurant noticed. I did. The man everyone else obeyed had just chosen to listen. And for the first time, I wondered whether that frightened his enemies more than his anger ever could. The audit took 27 minutes. It felt longer. Mason sat at an empty table near Bellini's front windows, his tablet glowing against the dark glass, while Julian stood beside me in the private dining room. Nobody spoke much. There was nothing left to argue about until the records did. At 9:58, Mason walked toward us. I found it. Julian turned. Mason placed the tablet on the table. The garage company sent the credential history from Friday. I compared it with our transportation system tonight. He tapped the screen. The missing red contractor card was activated 40 minutes before your first meeting. The authorization came through an internal transportation account. Whose? Julian asked. Mason looked at him. Grant's. Julian did not react. Mason continued. Tonight, your original driver assignment was changed 12 minutes before the fake waiter entered Bellini's. Same account. I looked at Julian. Could someone else use his credentials? Yes, Mason said, which is why I checked the login verification. Both changes were approved through Grant's registered device. Julian stared at the screen. 12 years of trust reduced to timestamps and access records. His phone rang. Grant. Julian answered. Come to Bellini's. A pause. No warehouse. Here. He ended the call. Grant arrived 20 minutes later in a navy overcoat, carrying the irritated confidence of someone who expected Julian to follow old rules. He saw me first. His expression changed for half a second. She is still here? Julian remained seated. Sit down, Grant. This is between us. Then sit. Grant did. Mason placed the tablet between them. Your credentials changed my transportation schedule twice, Julian said. Grant barely glanced at the screen. Credentials can be copied. Your registered device approved both changes. That landed differently. Grant leaned back. So this is what we are doing now? 12 years together, and you trust a waitress over me. Julian's face stayed calm. This is not about Hannah. It became about her the moment you started listening to her. Grant looked at me. She sees a stranger check his watch twice, and suddenly everything we built means nothing? Silence. Julian's eyes sharpened. Nobody told you how many times he checked his watch. Grant froze. Only for a moment. But waitresses live inside moments like that. Mason must have mentioned it. I did not, Mason said. Grant looked toward the window. This proves nothing. By itself? No, Julian replied. That is why I waited for the records. Grant stared at him. I understood then what the second message had been designed to do. Grant expected anger. He expected Julian to rush to the warehouse. Accuse first, demand answers later. He had prepared for the man Julian used to be. You have changed, Grant said. You used to know weakness when you saw it. Julian glanced at me. Maybe I used to misunderstand it. She made you hesitate. She made me think. Grant laughed once. That is worse. Julian stood slowly. No raised voice. No threat. Just disappointment. You were my brother before any of this existed. Grant's expression finally lost its confidence. And you were someone people respected before you started asking permission from a waitress. Julian looked at me again. I did not tell him what to do. I did not need to. She never asked me to become weaker, he said. She reminded me I could choose what strength looked like. Mason stepped forward and quietly told Grant that the records would be handled through the appropriate legal channels. Grant looked at Julian as if waiting for the old reaction. It never came. A few minutes later, he was gone. Julian remained beside the table, staring at the empty chair. You saved my life twice, he said. I shook my head. The second time was different. I know. His voice softened. The second time was harder. He drove me home himself that night. When we reached my building, he did not tell me someone would stay outside. He did not offer money. He did not tell me when he would see me again. He simply opened the door and said, You are safe, Hannah. And you are free. I stepped onto the sidewalk, then looked back at him. For the first time, Julian Cross had all the power to ask me to stay and chose not to use it. 3 months passed without a single black SUV outside Bellini's. At first, I noticed the absence every night. I noticed it when I left work after midnight, when I crossed the street alone, when my phone stayed silent all the way home to Queens. Julian had meant what he said. I was safe. And I was free. Grant Holloway disappeared from Julian's organization after the access records were turned over through legal channels. Mason contacted me once to confirm that no further action was required from me, and Sarah eventually stopped asking why I had become suspicious of unknown phone numbers. Julian sent nothing. No flowers. No money. No invitations disguised as instructions. Only one handwritten note arrived through Mason a week after that final night. It contained a single sentence. Thank you for reminding me that restraint is also power. I kept it in my kitchen drawer beneath a stack of takeout menus and told myself that meant nothing. Then October arrived. On a cold Friday evening, I was carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water toward table 6 when Bellini's front doors opened at 7:12. I knew it was him before I looked. Not because the restaurant went silent this time. It did not. Julian Cross walked inside alone. No Mason. No entourage. No private entrance. He wore a charcoal coat over a simple gray suit and waited behind another couple at the hostess stand. Actually waited. Jenna hurried toward me. Hannah, there is a man asking for your section. I know. You know? Long story. Julian chose a small table beside the windows instead of table 12. When I approached, he looked up. Good evening, Hannah. Mr. Cross. One eyebrow lifted. We are back to that. You disappeared for 3 months. You asked me to respect your choices. I did. I was trying. I hated how reasonable that sounded. I handed him a menu. What would you like? Dinner. That is usually why people come here. A familiar almost smile appeared. Chicken piccata. Coffee. Sparkling water. Very ordinary. I am experimenting. So I served him exactly like everyone else. He never asked me to sit. Never interrupted me while I worked. Never used his influence to keep the restaurant open late. He simply ate dinner while rain began tapping softly against the windows. Near the end of my shift, I printed his check. For several seconds, I stared at the receipt and remembered the first one trembling in my hand. That message had been written because I wanted him to survive. The second had been written by someone who wanted fear to control us both. This one belonged only to me. I picked up a pen and wrote 4 words beneath the total. Dinner. Friday. Just you. I placed the folder beside his coffee. Julian opened it. His eyes moved across the message, then rose to mine. Is that an order? A choice? He leaned back slightly. There is a difference. An order works because someone is afraid to refuse. And a choice only matters when someone is free to say no. Julian looked at the receipt again. Friday at 7? 7:30. I work until 7. No private room? No Mason? No driver waiting outside. I smiled. You are learning. He signed the check and stood. At the door, he stopped and looked back at me. Months earlier, I had seen a man who could make an entire room lower its voice without saying a word. Now I saw something rarer. A man learning that being obeyed was not the same as being trusted, that protecting someone did not mean possessing their decisions, and that power could force almost anything except the one thing that mattered. The first message had saved his life. The second had exposed the world he built around himself. The last gave him something money, fear, and influence never could. The chance to be chosen. Julian had spent years ruling through certainty. I changed him by refusing to surrender my voice. Maybe that was why, when I finally chose him, he understood exactly what it was worth.